Guess what? You have the confidence inside of you already to achieve any musical goal that you want, including auditioning. So, how do you hone your confidence? Well, my friend, that is with the Confident Musician's Audition Guide. This guide is to get you from the practice room to on the stage for your auditions. We talk about everything, including planning your practice, that's in Chapter 1, working with accompanists in Chapter 3, getting into the zone at auditions, that's in Chapter 5. Chapter 2 is all about mental practice, setting up mock auditions, and basically everything about mock auditions in Chapter 4, and auditioners, which is scattered throughout the whole guide, and a load more. Seriously, this 43-page guide is my baby. I have poured my heart and soul into this to make sure it is exactly what you need for your auditions. So whether you are just about to go into your auditions, thinking about how you are going to start auditioning, or just curious about how auditioning works, this guide is for you. Let's be honest, the auditioning process might be a short process, but the effects of it can be life-changing. So invest in you, and let's make this the audition season of confidence. Let's get you auditioning with confidence. Check out the show notes for the link to your copy, or visit confidentmusicianing.com. I brain dump just absolutely everything, stream of consciousness, all of the things into a notebook. Hello and welcome to the Confident Musicianing Podcast. My name is Eleanor and I am a British American oboist studying at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. Literally my dream school. And it took me a long way to get there. I applied and auditioned for 12 schools in 3 different countries. It was a lot of hard work. But oh my gosh, so worth it. I want you to have the confidence to work hard in achieving your goals. So come with me as we go on this journey together. So sit down, pull up a chair, take a seat, or if you're on the go, welcome to the Confident Musicianing Podcast. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Confident Musicianing Podcast. Thank you so much for being here. I am so grateful that you are here and so lucky. I feel so lucky that you are here and that we can have this time to spend together, to chat and hang out and just, it's good vibes. So today we are going to be talking about taking notes after your sessions, or taking notes about your sessions, your practice, your lessons, that's it. So let's get into it. So basically, when I started working with the associate principal oboist of the Pittsburgh Symphony, I did not take notes after my lesson. And I remember one lesson, my teacher said to me, he was like, why don't you? Like, you should. Like, this is definitely something that you should do. And I can see why. Because when I started taking notes, just the lessons became so much more valuable because I was able to retain more information and just have the lessons be worth more to me. And I have been doing this now for about 3.5 years. I still take notes, and it's so important to my lessons. It is like a part of them. So today I want to show you how I take notes, because I feel like when we say take notes for a lesson, I was like, how do I do this? And you might be like that as well. So whether you take notes now and you love taking notes and maybe you just want to see how someone else takes notes, or you're curious about taking notes, or you're like, Eleanor, what are you talking about? let's get into this and see. So I have a lot of notebooks. If you're listening to this, I am currently holding, I don't know how many, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 notebooks, all filled with notes. This is not the extent of my notebooks that I have. This is most of them, but not all of them. These notebooks are all notebooks that I have finished, I have filled, and they are full of notes from my lessons. And they're just full of knowledge, and I brought them with me from the States to the UK, because I just moved recently to the UK to study at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. So all of these notebooks that I'm holding are notes that I took in the States. But I still brought them over in my suitcase because they are so, so, so valuable to me in my practice and in my learning. So I have them here, and we're gonna talk about them and dive into it, and I'm so excited to do this with you. So let's get into it. So the first thing that I think is important to talk about is whether we are taking notes in the lesson versus after the lesson. I think this is really important because if we're in, say, a lecture, you would take notes during your lecture. That makes sense. But in a lesson, I feel like it's a wee bit different. I almost always take notes after. Almost always. Like, in fact, maybe 98% of the time I am taking notes after. Well, 100% of the lessons I'm taking notes after. But 98% of the note taking I do is after the session. And the idea of it is when I am in the lesson, I am there. I am focused. I am listening to my teacher. I am doing what my teacher says. I am, I play something my teacher says, play it like this. I try it. I understand it through there. And then when I go home, or maybe on my way home, or in the library or whatever, I brain dump just absolutely everything, stream of consciousness, all of the things into a notebook. And I think this is so helpful to soak it in during your lesson and then just spew it. Well, that's kind of gross. Just put it out on a page and have that just brain dump into a notebook. And yeah, it's amazing. And you might be thinking, Eleanor, what if I don't remember everything? And I understand that. I understand that nervousness of not necessarily remembering everything that you learned in your lesson. And what I say to that is you'll probably remember more than you realize. At least in my experience, I think, oh my gosh, what am I going to remember? And then I get down to writing and it just flows. And the thing that really helps me remember things, especially if I'm not, if I struggle with, because sometimes I do struggle to remember the things and I'm like, gosh, what did they say? What didn't they say? And of course you don't get everything in the notebook, and that's fine as well. But something that I found really, really, really helpful is to have the music with you and look at the music as you're writing it down. So not necessarily just have a notebook and think about it, but actually take out the music that you were working on and look at the notes and everything on the page, and that can sometimes help kind of jog your memory. And also it's helpful if you're talking about a specific phrase. You can say the measure numbers, etc. So I highly recommend having your music out as you are taking notes. Another thing that's helpful is to take notes in the order that it was in the lesson. So let's say I work on, an etude first, and then I've been working on the Schumann romances recently. So etude, maybe Farling etude, Schumann romance, and something else, reed making. My notes then in my notebook would have that as well. Farling, Schumann, reed making, and that would be like that. And it helps me kind of remember everything if it's in the same order. And that's just a me thing. If it's different for you, then that's fine too. The only time, I did say 98% of the time, the only time that I take notes in class, or not in class, in the lesson, is when we're talking about reed making and there are numbers. Numbers that I know I won't remember. So for instance, if you're tying, and this is very specific to oboes, but I'm sure that there's, some equivalent for other instruments as well. But if you're, say, tying the thread of the reed at a specific number, or maybe, something has to be this specific, thick on the micrometer, or just basically numbers that I know that I might not remember, I write those down. Or diagrams if I have to draw a reed and then, write things on it. Sometimes I'll do that in the lesson, but that isn't to disturb or disrupt the lesson. I'm not making the teacher wait while I write, right? I'm just kind of jotting things down as they're showing me so that I will remember those, because I know that numbers I don't always remember. If it's tie to, 47 millimeters or whatever, that I might not remember the first time I hear it. So that's important to remember as well. The second thing you might think, the second question you might have, and I had when I started doing this, is what do I write? My answer to that is everything. Absolutely everything that you can remember. Just go for it. Now, there's a lot of, if you like listening to this, my, 11 notebooks, there is a lot to write. And there, when you start writing it does go. But I think it's interesting because I feel like there are two different types of notes that I take. I take detailed notes, and then I take broad notes. And I'm going to pick a notebook out from the stack here. This one is, I love these notebooks. So this one has writing on the outside of it because I ran out of paper in the notebook. So on the cover, if there's writing, which is which is so like aesthetic of taking notes. But if I go into this, I feel like this notebook I used maybe this time last year. I'm not sure, but if I go into it and I just pick a random page, it's so specific. So for instance, we have measure 3. The grace notes are on the beat. Make the C louder than the E flat and the E flat softer than the C. Very specific. Line 2, measure 2. Make this line focused. Don't accent the downbeats. The fast notes, move it. That's very, very detailed. Then you have other notes where you could say, pay attention to the dynamics, don't change it unless it has to be changed. Or I recently had a lesson where we talked about different methods of practicing depending on how much time you have. That's not very detailed, but it is kind of a broader idea. So there's 2 different ways to take notes, and I think it's important to do both. You'll have sometimes, I do this especially with Mozart, where I take notes and it's like line, it's like measure 1, measure 2, measure 3, and literally every measure has a thought. And then I'll have times where I do broad things where it's like, line 1, create a stronger crescendo, or something that is more broad than, this note has to be like this and this note has to be like this. So I think it's important to just jot down everything. Right? Absolutely everything that you can remember, and just do a lot of stuff. One thing that helps me as well is I put a simile, which is Italian, and if you might have seen it on music. It's a and simile is like and similar. So if I have, say, a phrase or something that shows up a lot, I don't have to like write it over and over and over again. So I'll say, for instance, measures 50 to 51 a simile. It has to be like this. And that means measures 50 and 51 have to be like this, but so do other measures that have the same theme. So that is that. What to write, everything. And you might be thinking, well, Eleanor, how long does this take if I am writing everything from, say, an hour lesson, or maybe longer or shorter, I don't know. And my answer to that is it just takes as long as it needs to take. And sometimes I am quite surprised by how long or how short it takes. Sometimes I finish a lesson, I'm like, I don't have that much to write, and then it just flows, and I'm like, before I know it, I've filled like 2 pages. Or sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, there was so much goodness that happened in this lesson, but it was all broad things. So on a page, it's not actually that many words. So it's very different, and you kind of just find what works for you. Now, the third thing is write things that work for you, which is just what I said in the second thing. So this is important as well. So for instance, imagery for me is really helpful. Making things be more like visual. For instance, if I say something like line 3 is, I don't know, floaty like a feather or something like that. Maybe someone else might not understand what I mean by that, but as long as I understand what I mean by that, it can be fine. I say a lot yum pum pum. This is very yumpy. And what I mean by that is the notes are round. I say like molasses if I want something to be really kind of thick and full of sound. Things like that might not necessarily make sense to other people, but just write the things that work for you. And if your teacher says one thing, right? If your teacher says, do it like this, like a floating like a feather, and maybe floating like a feather doesn't work for you. Maybe you tried it thinking about that and it doesn't work. But maybe if you think about it floating like a leaf, for instance, and your teacher's like, you think about floating like a leaf and your teacher's like, oh yes, that sounded good. Then write in your thing, floating like a leaf. Write what works for you. Or you can write what your teacher says as well, but prioritize what works for you. It's really helpful to do that. Yeah, so it can sound quite strange. Sometimes I've posted like pictures where I've had like my notebook in the picture, and sometimes I get responses like, what are your notes? They're weird. Like they say random stuff like floating like a feather or yum pum pum or things like that. And yeah, it's just stuff that works for me. So do what works for you, because in the end, then, that's the most important thing. All right, let's do a recap, shall we? The first thing is in the session, taking notes in the session versus after the session. I recommend 100% take the notes after the session, unless there are things like numbers that you won't remember, and you can say, can I just jot these numbers down? That's more for reed making for me, but it might translate into other instruments as well. The second thing is what to write. Everything. Write everything. This is really important. We talked about details versus bigger stuff, more broader stuff. Write both of them. Write everything that comes to your mind. I even, for a while, I wrote like motivational stuff as well, because I was going through like a phase where I had a lot of low self-esteem with my oboe playing. So I would write these phrases like, I know it's hard, but you've got this, or, I'm proud of you for working through this, etc. And so when I went back to my notes in practicing, I saw them and saw those little quotes, and not quotes, but like motivational sentences that I had written, and it helped me. It helped me a bit. So that's something important as well, if you want to do that. And then the last thing is write things that work for you, even if they don't necessarily make sense to other people. These are your notes. Your notes are personal to you. If you want to write yum pum pum or yumpy or like molasses or like a feather or whatever it is, write it as long as it works for you. That is the most important thing. All right. That is about it for this episode. I hope that this episode was helpful for you, and I hope that it inspires you to get a journal, to get a pen, and to write some things, or a notebook, whatever it is. You can go as fancy schmancy or as not fancy schmancy. I remember I'm currently holding 2 notebooks. These notebooks say things like passionate about culture and history, just add German, because they are notebooks that I got for free in my middle school German class, and I didn't write in them for years, and then I found them, and I just wrote oboe notes in them. Another one says feeling adventurous, just add German. It has nothing to do with oboe, and they're also like really, like, they were free. I didn't spend much money on them at all. I spent no money on them. But they work for notes, and they were helpful. So you can go, as fancy schmancy or as chill as you want. It doesn't matter, whatever works for you. So I hope that this episode was helpful for you. Let me know if it was. I'd be so grateful. You can DM me on Instagram at eleanor.oboe. You can email me at eleanor@confidentmusicianing.com. I'd love to hear from you. I hope that this episode was helpful. As always, all the things to do with this episode will be in the show notes, including the blog post that goes with this episode. If you want more from me, you can sign up for my email list. That is also something you can do. I send fun emails about music, cute, cozy, relaxing, chill emails, stuff about the podcast. I send out freebies, guides, all the things, behind the scenes, just fun stuff. So if that sounds like you, please do click the link in the show notes to sign up. And I will see you in the next episode. All right, take care. Bye.